by examiners. Some of the comments made by examiners in two PhD Viva Bosche and 2 DBA Viva, right? You can see for yourself. I just pick up the component or the parts that focuses on just the literature review. But first, let me share my slides. Have I shared my slides? Okay, let's share my slide. Now, this based on two students, which I pick up from the report. I cannot say who they are or which university they are from. Now, you look at the first one. This is a comment made by an external examiner. These candidate literature reviews are quite extensive and recent, right? So extensive in the sense that it covers almost, it's almost exhaustive. I mean, quite extensive, it's almost exhaustive. So this particular candidate has gone in great length, okay, to go through or to search for literatures that are pertaining, that almost, shall I say, he or she may have covered most of the top important literatures in this particular field of study. And it's recent in the sense that it's very up to date. Okay. However, the discussion in the last paragraph of page 30, this is coming from the thesis, I think, we moved to the problem statement. So this is one thing that you have to pick up. There are certain components that should be remain in chapter 1. Sometimes you place it in chapter 2. So before you submit your thesis, make sure that you go through again chapter 1 and chapter 2. Sometimes there are things that should be in chapter 1. You may have missed to move it to chapter 1. Supposed to be in chapter 1, but it is in chapter 2. For example, you discuss in great length about the motivation of your research, but you did not place it in chapter 1 to support your problem statement, right? So this is what I think, this is the comment made by that examiner. The candidate discussion on the variables are not supported. It is supported by literatures, but not recent literature, okay? Thus indicating that these issues are outdated or no longer relevant. Perhaps you come up with, in order to support the variables in your research framework, your discussion is based on literatures that are 5 years ago or 4 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago, but there's no recent literature that discuss on these variables which are very recent, whether these variables are still relevant or outdated, right? So it's very important why you must ensure that your literature review is very recent, okay? So the examiner suggested, please add more current literatures. So basically, this particular candidate did not really update the literature. As you can see, a lot of discussion in section 2.3 until 2.8, the literature has not been updated. So you must ensure that you have the most recent literature review. And then the candidate discussion on relationship between perceived usefulness, I think this must be the variable, between perceived usefulness, facilitating cognition, and mobile banking adoption has gone out of context in a way, in the sense that rather than focusing in the relationship, the candidate focused too much on research method and data collection method. You see, that section is a section that should be discussing about the research framework. It should be discussion about the theoretical framework, but instead he was talking about the methods based by other researchers, which should not have been placed there. It should be in a different section. And in fact, the examiner suggested that it should be tabulated, all right? And the discussion in this section is to build up your research plan. So basically, what happened here is that before you come up to your research framework, you must start discussion about the variable itself, or there must be some discussion on the theoretical framework, right? Whereas this particular candidate was talking about methods used. So it was out of place, and it should have been discussed later after you have built up the research framework. And the final part is the candidate research framework needs further elaboration. how did the candidates derive this framework? This is a very important point. I think you need to work on. There must be a good discussion on how you derive your framework. You come up with your research framework, but there was no initial discussion on how did you derive. Now, quite a number of candidates, what they did, they discussed a lot on the theoretical framework. They discussed on the variable and whatnot, but suddenly you have a framework. You have your research framework. So there was no discussion whatsoever how this research framework was derived. Okay, so and basically this is what the examiner was trying to stress on. There is no proper discussion. In other words, there seems to be a gap. There seems to be a gap. Before you get on to the research framework, you discuss on the theoretical framework, but you do not link them together. How this becomes the research framework of your research, right? So this is the comment made by the examiner in examiner in sorry, what am I doing? Okay, my mouse is too sensitive, sorry. Okay, and then in the second viva, this is another student. The comment made by the examiner is that literature lacks linkages and disjointed. And in other words, in your discussion of your literature review, you should link the section to section or even paragraph to paragraph. There must be linkages. It should not be totally disjointed. All right, it should not be disjointed. The reason, because you want to have a smooth flow of discussion. There must be a smooth flow of discussion. So there must be linkages between what is discussed earlier, what is discussed now, and what is to be discussed later. Okay, so the candidate needs to reorganize her literature review by dividing. Okay, the problem with this candidate is that her discussion, one paragraph is too lengthy. Okay, for example, if I'm not, if I can remember, this particular candidate paragraph, I think she has about 1 page, 1 paragraph. Your paragraph should not be too long. It can be very boring. Okay, your paragraph should not be too long. When you are discussing your literature review, make it into smaller paragraph, or even if possible, make it into smaller subsection. Okay, sometimes you feel that you want to put everything in, you get excited. You forgot that you have dumped everything into 1 paragraph, 1 long paragraph. Okay, don't make it too long. Okay, she did not critically discuss and synthesize her literature review. Now, what do you mean by synthesize? Okay, now the mention here is critical. When we talk about being discussed critically, means you don't copy paste or you don't summarize what others have said. You must critically discuss. You must synthesize. That I will discuss after this. What do you mean by synthesizing in your literature review? The candidate needs to explain how the research framework is. Again, this candidate did not discuss how the research framework is derived. Okay, suddenly out of the blue or out of the moon, the framework appears in the chapter on literature review, and there was no discussion how that thing got there or how he or she derived it. Okay. She did discuss in the various constructs, but did no justice by linking them within the framework. Okay, she discussed about the theoretical framework. She discussed about some of the variables that are important to her research, but then she did not. She stopped short of linking it to the framework. Okay, suddenly she got the framework which is totally different from what that is being discussed earlier. So this is very important. When you prepare your theoretical framework, make sure that there is a good, smooth discussion. It's just like storytelling. When you're telling a story, there must be a nice introduction. There must be, I mean, when people listen to you, if you listen to a good story, for example, you can see that there's a smooth transition of the story, and you can see how it happened, various incidents, so something like this. Okay, so in writing your literature review, you should come up with a smooth write-up of your literature review, link them together. Okay, do not make them disjointed from what that is discussed earlier. I've seen some literature that they discuss on a certain issue, suddenly it jumps to another issue, and then suddenly jump to a different issue. So you don't see what is being actually discussed. You must look at your literature review in totality, not as a separate by itself. Okay. Now I'll get back to the DBA comment later on. Let's move a bit more. Okay, just a bit more before we go to Q&A. I know you got some questions to ask. I'll keep that later. Hold on a second. Let me move this. Okay. Now, let me discuss a bit more. What do you do when you read your articles? Now, I've seen quite a number of good articles being read by PhD students, but they fail to pick up the good points in the articles, okay? So it is important for you to have this critical reading mindset or critical reading skills, where in addition to ascertaining the main point that the author is trying to convey, it is also important for you to adopt a questioning and analytical approach as you read. Yeah, as you read the articles, the materials, you must have that questioning and analytical approach. You just cannot read just for the sake of reading, or you just cannot read trying to summarize what that is being discussed in the paper. You must have that analytical approach. You must have that the need to question the paper, right? So you must read critically and analytically. Try to answer the following question in relation to all the text you use for it. As you read the literature, the text that you need to prepare for your literature review, try to ask the following question. For example, what is the author's central argument or main point? What is his argument? What is his main point? Okay. What does the author wants you, the reader, to accept? What is it actually that he's trying to convey to you? Okay. Ask question. What conclusion does the author reach? What is the conclusion of his paper? What is he trying to reach at? Okay, what is his conclusion of his paper? What evidence does the author put forward to support his or her argument? So what evidence? Is there any evidence? Does the author put up good evidence to support his or her argument so that you can adopt it, or you can use to cite in your literature review? Do you think the evidence is strong enough, all right, to support the argument and conclusion? Or is the evidence relevant and wide-reaching enough? These are the things that you need to ask. Okay, as you read, look at the evidence. Is there any strong evidence to support the argument? Does the author make any unstated assumptions? Okay, for example, when sometimes they may talk about shared belief with the readers. Are these unstated assumptions? Okay. I mean, are there any unstated assumptions that he did not mention there, but you try to pick up from there, okay? And can these assumptions be challenged, all right? Can you challenge the assumptions? What is the background context in which the text was written? So you got to understand what is the background context where the text was written. Perhaps the author was focusing all during the COVID period, right? So of course, the background may be different during post or pre-COVID. So you got to understand what context. Look at the context. Does the cultural and historical context has any effect on the author's assumption? What about the author's assumption? Is he influenced by cultural and historical context? Okay, whether the content or the way it had been presented is influenced by cultural or historical context. So when you look at that, then only you will have a critical mindset, right? You don't just read for the sake of reading, but you read with an open mind, with a critical mindset, and you pose a number of questions pertaining to the paper. Now, I'm not sure whether you have been exposed to article critics. Some university, they conduct courses on how to do article critics, right? Because that is good in a way, because it enable the students to think critically. When I was teaching at AAGBS UITM, there was one, I was teaching the mixed mode PhD students on recent business trend. So basically, we taught them on how to do article critique, which is good in a way, because by being exposed to that kind of skills, they will start to become critically and analytically in analyzing the literature, right? If you do find such training program, please go. It's good for you, right? It's good for you to have that kind of exposure. Okay. And then note taking. Now, after you read the article, right? After you read the article, you must take down note. This is very important. I've seen students who just read the article, just set it aside without making any notes on the article or about the article. Okay, you have to make some notes because it is very. Some of you may just type it, right? Just type it. That's also a good way of doing it because it remains in your laptop and you can source it later. Okay, I remember during my time I wrote, I took notes. Okay, my mistake was I just wrote it on the paper itself, and somehow I misplaced the paper. I couldn't find the paper again. All right, so I lost both my notes and my paper. So make sure you have a good set of perhaps you have a notebook or anything, or just write it on, type it on the laptop so that you can access it later. Okay, so when taking notes, what do? You identify and understand the main point of a text. This is to recall. So basically, note it down. Okay, identify what are the main points of the text, and then number two is to use it in later research and writing. Once you've written it down there, it's there. You can just retrieve it later. Okay, retrieve it later, and as you type or as you write it or as you take down notes, it helps you to concentrate on the paper. Okay, so when you read, make sure that you take points as you read. Okay, and you make connection between different sources. For example, you read an article by Lumpkin, and then you read another article by Simpson. Okay, for example, what is the connection between the two papers? What are they talking about? Are they talking about the same thing, or are they talking about contradicting things? Right. So connect up between the two, and rearrange information so that later on you can write it in a nicer way. You're ready to write it later. So the purpose why you need you rearrange the information because you want to avoid plagiarism, right? This is very important because plagiarism. I noticed some students did not realize it. They are committing plagiarism subconsciously or even unconsciously. Okay. So what do you mean by plagiarism? There was a question earlier on plagiarism. Plagiarism refers to, what we meant here is that use of cited author's exact work with no or little attempt at rephrasing. In other words, this will be easily picked up by Tenitin, right? So avoid citing the author's exact work. Okay, so try to rephrase it, right, in a way so that it will not be considered as plagiarism, unless these words are part of a direct quotation, as said earlier by one of the question. Okay, if it is part of a direct quotation, this is plagiarism, even if it's the source of author's knowledge. Unless the words are part of the direct quotation. Okay. Sorry, where was I? Okay, you use direct quotations to use direct quotations when the exact words of a source text are used. So in other words, when you pluck out the exact words, okay, you use it as a direct quotation. If you use it too often, excessive use suggests that you are hiding behind the idea of a quoted author, and you do not fully understand your work. Okay, so do not use it excessively. I've seen one thesis where student almost every page there is some form of quotations, right? So we had to ask him to redo back the literature review by taking up the quotation and ask him to rephrase the sentences, because it shows that he doesn't really understand what that is being stated. So he'll just put the exact quotation there. Okay. Therefore, it is essential that you are able to rephrase and summarize the point you are taking from source material. So as you pick up from the source material, right, you transfer it to your note in the form of note taking. It's either you rephrase it or you summarize it so that you can use it later when you do your literature review. This is to avoid plagiarism, because I've seen a lot of students did that. They thought that by putting everything in the form of quotation, they could get away during the 19th stage. They found out it's not so. Now, one of my PhD students from Pakistan, Dr. Amir Rashid, he completed his PhD in 3 years, and I think he got the best student award at the faculty when I was in UTM. He showed me a secret on how to. I won't share it here. I don't think I want to share it here. On how to reduce the similarities index from 30%, 20% to 10%, and he even showed me how to reduce it to 0. So there's a way that you can beat the system. So that's why I say I was telling my student 30 should not. It is just a similarity index. It does not exactly measure plagiarism, but it is the best that we have to prevent or to avoid plagiarism. Okay, so if you know how to do it, I mean, I've seen how he did it. I was quite surprised how he did it. He showed me how he moved from, he reduced it from 30% right up down to 0%. And initially I did not believe him because I thought that the thing is foolproof, right? But with the same write-up, his thesis, he managed to bring it down even to 0%. So and until today, to tell you the truth, I cannot share with you because I don't really remember how we did it. Okay, so but it can be done, but I wouldn't suggest that, right? I wouldn't suggest that. Okay, plagiarism is a practice which must be avoided. It is considered as a literary theft and suggests a lack of respect for the work of others. So you do not want others to do the same thing to you. So it is advisable that you too do not do the same thing to others. Okay, so have respect for others. So when plagiarism occurs, it can result in work being failed or even expulsion from a course of study. Now, let me share you one experience which happened to one PhD student when I was in UTM. His proposal was actually copied from another PhD student who has just finished his viva, and somehow or other this particular student who is about to submit his PhD proposal got hold of the thumb drive and copied everything, because it seems that their topic are slightly similar with some differences in terms of focus, right? And what happened was he changed the research proposal during, and the supervisor did not notice it because the topic was quite the same, but the content was slightly different. And he managed to, actually he showed his supervisor the one that he wants to submit for his proposal defense. Okay, the supervisor approved it and asked him to submit to the office. Now, before he went to the office, he already had the copied version of someone else's work, and he submitted that. But he was unlucky because one of the examiners, somehow or other, when reading that particular proposal, had seen something like that. And it happened that the husband to one of the examiner brought back the draft version of the thesis that was presented by that particular student because he wanted to have a look at it. And he showed his wife read through a bit. And then she remembered, oh, I've seen that. And she called up her husband, bring over that particular write-up, the draft of the thesis, and they put it side by side. It was almost very similar. That cannot be a coincidence. That cannot be a coincidence. So finally, the the proposal defense did not take place, they called up the student. He admitted that he copied from this particular thesis, and he was given a choice: either they fail him and they send him for disciplinary action, or he withdraw from the program. He decided to withdraw. Okay, he decided to withdraw. I think they give him a choice. If it was me, I wouldn't. I will have practically take action on him because that is actually pure plagiarism. Okay, pure plagiarism. So whatever it is, be extra careful when you have completed your thesis. Before you send it for final binding and whatever, keep the soft copy in a safe place, right? Do not leave it anywhere, because as long as you have not submitted the full thesis, it could have been copied by someone else. So that's a lesson learned. Okay, so basically it says here, use your own words during note taking. Can avoid plagiarism in your writing. So as you read, you write it down, or you type back, use your own words. In a way, it helps you to avoid plagiarism. Do not copy, paste. Now, some students, what they do, they copy, they paste, and then they try to rephrase it while they are retyping it on screen, try to make it different or whatever. Now, I wouldn't suggest you to do that, because the best way is to read, summarize it, then type it, right? Because sometimes you may forget to rephrase it. You may even end up putting back the same thing again. All right. Okay, now any question up till now? Anyone? Anybody got any question? There's some question here. Good. Will using software such as EndNote be useful? Oh, yes, I will recommend you guys to use EndNote. If so, what are the more user-friendly software? Now, I'm not that because so far I'm quite familiar with EndNotes. If you have the opportunity, use it. Okay, it is very, very helpful. Also, try to minimize direct quotation unless you need to state definition. Yes, always try to replace. Good. Yes, thank you, Lee. Yasmin, when is mediating variable? Oh, okay. You are asking. Okay, we'll get to that later on. When is mediating variable necessary? Why do you need a mediating variable? What about moderating variable? Why do you need a moderating variable? Okay, so these are the questions we will discuss later on. You should ask that during our supervision, Yasmin. But anyway, I will address to that later. Now, Trinity only recognizes double quotation mark, not single one. Okay, that's a good suggestion. You mean the single? Oh, sorry, this is a discussion between Anis and Lee. You must quote properly. Refer to Monash University and how to increase originality. Okay, good. Lee, are you from Monash? I did that, and inverted comma still being flagged about for effective speed reading, which part we should focus. Okay, now I when I attended the speed reading class many years ago, we were taught to as you can just skim through. Okay, you can just skim through things that are not much relevant, but when you come to the point that are relevant, you spend more time there. In books it's easy, because in books they will bold the important components. So as you read through very fast, we come to texts that are in bold. You slow down and spend more time reading there. Okay, because it shows that that particular part of the book is or the page is very important. But when you're reading articles, journals, they do not do that, in the sense that you just skim through until you come to the point that there are keywords that are important to you. You stop there and spend a little bit more time there, so that you will focus on what that is being discussed. Okay. Now, inverted comma marks, interesting. Okay. Yeah, how he managed to deal with the rate. I think I need to contact him back. He's in Pakistan now. When we do speed reading, is the methodology part of paper important to read? Yeah, when we do speed reading, right? Yeah, as I said earlier, if you're methodology is very important in that sense that you may want to pick it up and you want to discuss it in your thesis, for example. You want to determine what is the method used by other researchers. Yes, you do. Okay, it's important to read too. We can code using inverted commas. Probably there are specific definition. Are we allowed to replace, for example, who definition in certain key term? WHO, is it? In certain key term, specific definition are allowed to use in replace. Now, I think when it comes to specific definition, you have no choice. You have to sort of like specific definition. You have to either now depend on how you want to do it. You can code it, right? Or in other case, you can just rephrase it. It doesn't matter. In a sense, as long as you got the message right. Okay. I know some they feel that, oh, they want to use the original code because they do not want to move away from the actual meaning. All right. I think that is okay in that sense, that as long as see, when you do your proofreading, sometimes when you do your proofreading of your thesis, the proofreader may adjust some of the sentences. May be much different from what you wrote earlier. Okay, but as long as the meaning is there and you want what you want to mention is being understood, I think that should be okay. Are we talking? Yes, we are talking about literature review. Rephrase other literature review in your own words. We are not taking, yeah, basically not to say rephrase. When you read, okay, and you write it back, okay, write it back. The idea is that do not put exactly what that is written in the original article, because that then you are plagiarizing. Okay, so read, understand what it means, summarize it in a way, write it back in a way that you understand. Okay, so that you will use it back in your literature review. Yes, I agree. I did not discuss in literature review metrics here. It is compulsory for us to put SLR. What is SLR table in the? Okay, that one I got to that. The researcher's voice should be in the literature review to evaluate. Yes, definitely it has to be, and that's why you have viva voce, because the viva voce means be there, be heard. Okay, viva, be there, but voce, be heard. So they also want to hear your opinion, your voice during the viva voce. Okay. Now let's move on. Rephrasing the original idea or sentence without referencing it. Yes, that is also plagiarism. You have to cite the source of your reference. Okay. But what I meant is that you take exactly as it is. Even you quote it many times, they can also be considered as plagiarism. Nanjing University is very particular about plagiarism, so we are asked to aim for 5 to 10%. Okay, that's quite low actually, among the lowest, I think. Yes, read to understand with your own understanding and acknowledge. Yeah, that's the best way. Okay, well, you're from Nanjing University. Okay, good. All right. Okay, let's move on. Now, the next stage is once you have read, once you have understood what you have read, the next stage is how do you write it? How do you write it? How do I adjust the? Okay, got it. Okay, now next is the literature review process. One, you have everything in order. You've read articles, you have taken down the notes, you have read it critically. The next stage is to put it down writing, to write it. Yeah, to write it. Now, according to Ridley, 2012, the searching of the literatures, reading the source, and writing the review are all interconnected, and they are cyclical in process, as you can see in the chart. All right, it's cyclical in nature. It is an ongoing process. Basically, you need to do it as time goes on. Yeah, there is no clear cut-off point when one activity ends and the other begins. Okay, sorry. What's wrong with my slides? Okay. So in a way, you cannot say that, oh, I already read my article, I'm going to stop here, then I'm going to start writing, or okay, or I've searched all my article, I'm going to stop searching now. I'm going to start reading, then I'm going to start writing. Okay, it is an ongoing process. Okay, there's no clear point where it ends and where it begins. Right. So there may be an intensive focus on the literature review in the early weeks and months of your research project. So the the process, such as you can see in the chart, is connected with the review, continue to be interwoven throughout the research project. It will continue throughout your research project. You will keep on searching, you will keep on reading, and you will keep on writing until you have submitted your thesis for viva voce. Right? So it is what my colleague used to say, Prof, this is a vicious circle. Okay, in a way that you have to keep on reading, you have to keep on searching, you have to keep on writing until you are ready for your viva voce. So there's no ending actually. Okay, and your writing in turn helps you to discover and clarify your idea. Once you read, you search, you read, the moment you put it on writing, this is when it helps you to discover and clarify your ideas, and can result in refinement of the focus of research and the content of your review, right? So this is very important in the sense that my supervisor used to told me, Hassan, read but write. Okay, read but write. Do not just read without writing, because I know some students, they just keep on reading and reading. They came back to the supervisor. So what should I write? I've read too many things. I do not know what to write. Right. So that shows that you have not been able to read effectively. You have not been critical in your reading. You have not been asking questions as you read. You just read and read and read. All right. So the moment you start asking questions, you start criticizing. You start reading critically. Then you begin to pick up the main point, and you start putting it on writing. Okay, it took me about 6 months to start writing. I've been reading and reading and reading until my supervisor said, "Son, you have enough reading. Please start writing." Okay, so the moment I start writing, I realized, oh, okay, I've got it. Okay, I've got it. I keep saying I've got it. I've got it. Okay, if I keep on reading, I never start writing, I will not be there. So once you start writing, you keep on reviewing. You read, you write, and you proofread it, you review it. I remember I submitted my write-up to my supervisors. And in my case, I had to submit to him a few days before I go and see him, 3 days before, so that he will read. And he will make comments, he will scratch in red, okay, and ask me to become, I came to see him, we discussed, right? I had to go back, retype it. And then I submitted again. He went through it. He scratched, okay. He wrote so many things in there, scribble and everything. I go back, type it, until finally I realized during the 5th round, after discussing with him, I went back. I was going back to my original script that I prepared. Okay, in a way that I realized that it's true. This is something like a circle in the sense that and once and until the supervisor is happy with your work, right, then only you feel comfortable to move forward. Okay, that was my own experience, right? My supervisor was very thorough. Okay, sometimes I'm partly influenced by him, but it's very tiring if I follow his style of supervising. It's very thorough. He will read line by line. And when you get back your write-up, you see a lot of red marks. And sometimes you feel a bit depressed, you feel a bit disappointed because you've done your best to come up with your write-up, but when you went to see him, but then you have to persevere, right? You have to persevere. Because once you start writing and once you start preparing your literature review, you're beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel, okay? You're ready for your proposal defense, okay? You're ready for your proposal defense. And then in the UK, when I was doing my PhD, there was no presentation during proposal defense. I just went into the meeting room. I remember there was David Johnson, Professor David Johnson was there, David Coates was there, and we just had a friendly discussion. They were asking me, what is it that you want, how is it you want to move on, what is it that you're going to do, tell us how you're going to collect the data later on. It was very friendly. There was no presentation, nothing. And then, right, okay, and then after 1 hour of discussion and everything, they give their input. I left the room, sorry, and my supervisor came to see me later. Okay, Hassan, you passed your proposal defense. Your next stage is data collection. But make sure you keep on writing and reading, okay? So that's what happened. Even during my Viva, there was no presentation. My examiner doesn't even have a PhD. He had many years experience in the industry. So I went in, but the internal examiner was with a PhD. I forgot his name. And it was very, very, very tense question and answer session. There was no presentation, very tense question and answer session. They threw in question, I defended, or I responded, and finally they're happy. Okay, they're happy. And my supervisor said, okay, Hassan, we've decided that he mentioned the result of the Viva. And after a few weeks after that, before I went back to Malaysia, I went to see him again. How was my correction? It was very small correction. He said, actually, initially they want to let you pass with no correction, but that never happened before in the history of the university for the last couple of years. So they say after going through, they found 2 spelling mistakes, and that was my minor correction. Okay, but it was tough. Yeah, it was tough reaching to that level. I had to send it for a number of proofreading. Initially, when I came back to Malaysia, I sent it to an English teacher for proofreading. That was a stupid mistake. I sent it back to my supervisor. My supervisor said, go and find another proofreader. You better proofread your proofreader's work. So finally, I contacted a guy in the UK. I was in Malaysia at that time before I submitted. Contacted a guy in the UK. She agreed to proofread. I had to pay her about I pay her about, it was about £500 at that time. So 500 times 8, it was about almost 5,000 ringgit, 4,000 ringgit. Okay. So I emailed to her. She did all the proofreading and everything. She sent it back to me. I sent it for binding, and I sent it to my supervisor. Right. So this is the moment you submitted your complete thesis. This is when you feel that whatever you've done for the last couple of years is well rewarded. And somehow or other, I feel part of my life is missing, because I'm so used to I'm so used to going through this rigorous exercise in my PhD research. So when I finish my PhD, I've submitted everything, I feel something is missing. Yeah, something is missing. So this is when you need to start to focusing on publication of your research. And your thesis especially. I managed to publish about 11 papers before it gets outdated. So that is why during your research, you can start publishing your literature review in terms of a conceptual paper, and at least you get one paper out. Okay, next. See, okay. Now, as you prepare to write out, you must organize your sources. Okay. After collecting the relevant literature, you've got a lot of information to work through, and no clear idea on how to put it all together. So you need to organize. Okay. Before you start writing, you need to organize, because you have no idea, you have no clear idea how to move on. So you need to organize your notes in a way that allow you to see the relationships between sources. Okay. So having endnotes will help you a lot here. Okay. One way to begin synthesizing the literature is to put your notes into a table, for example. I will show a table. Someone mentioned just now, Lee mentioned about the matrix table. That is very helpful in that sense. Okay. One way to begin synthesizing the literature is to put your notes into a table, depending on your topic and type of literature you're dealing with. Okay. There are a couple of different ways that you can organize this. One of the way is by having a summary table. I'm not sure whether my students here, Chimaka, are you here? I've asked her to come up with a table of the summary of her literature, right? So I want her to keep on progressing, keep on adding more and more summary into her table, okay? A summary table will collate the key point of each source under consistent headings. And this is a good approach if your sources tend to have similar structure. For instance, they are all empirical papers. I will show you some example of this. Okay. Each row in the table is a list of one source, and the other column identifies a specific part of source. You can decide which heading to include based on the most relevant to the literature you're dealing with. Okay, it's up to you how you want to do it. Always start with a summary table. In fact, those of you who have started your DBA program, doing your coursework, and you're going to start your dissertation later on, actually you can start now. You can start by coming up with a summary table of articles that you have read pertaining to your area of research. Okay, you may want to include column like what is the aim of the research as you read articles, right? You look at the aim, what are the aim of the research, what method do you use, what are the variables, what is their population, what is their target population, what sample size they use in the article, in their research, and what are their conclusions. Okay, so for each study, you briefly summarize each of these aspects, and you can include columns for your own evaluation and analysis. So it will look something like this. You come up, for example, source number one, literature number one. As you read through, you find out what is the aim of the literature. Okay, what is the aim of the research? Sorry, what method did they use in their study? What is their population? What are the conclusion? What is their evaluation? What is your evaluation on that paper? Now, I shared what my previous PhD student did, Amir Rashid. He graduated many years ago. This was what he did, okay? He was looking at the research type, whether it is exploratory, empirical, or conceptual. And on the other side, he named the authors, okay? And finally, he talked about the findings. What are their findings on small, medium businesses? He was looking at market orientation of small businesses in Pakistan. So this he came up with this table, and from this table, it helps him to write up his literature review. Okay, but now for those of you who are new, I think for those of you who are already in the late stage of your research, this may I'm not sure whether you've used it or not, but for those who are going to start your literature review, this will be very helpful. Okay, I think Lee mentioned about matrix table. Initially I put it on slide, but I took it out because I just want to focus on this one. Okay, now let's look at some of the questions. Prof, at literature review section, can we also include recent event? For example, as we write about the study of property developer, I think that one I would prefer to put it in the background of the study. For example, you may want to start a bit because you want to focus on the literature, or you can, but don't put too much on that. Okay, you can Anis, you can basically talk about. I know what you're trying to say. You're trying to set the tone for your discussion. So that the reader will understand, but do not spend too much on that. Maybe talk to your supervisors, get his ideas, get his opinion, because certain supervisors may allow, some supervisors may not, right? Discuss with him or her why you want to include it. Explain to them. I think the whole idea is to work closely with your supervisor. I know some supervisors are quite busy. To me, my experience, the best supervisor that I had experience, I got only one supervisor actually. Also from my colleagues doing PhD, they said the best those who are busy. Because the busy supervisor, they are always on their toe, they're always reading, they're always doing things, compared to the supervisors who are not busy, although they have more time for you, but actually they may even give less time to you. Okay. Yeah, Lee, you can put year, source, but it's up to you, right? What you want to put in there, as long as you come up with this table, and from this table, you start doing your write-up, okay? If you're using the methodology review, you will still need to have gap analysis discussion. I know where you're trying to get at, because some will wants to, yeah. I think gap analysis is more on your problem statement. Okay, focus on the problem statement rather than on the methodology. Methodology is just how you carry out your research. Can we get a recorded of this section? Okay, you can. The organizer will pass it to you. Okay, let's move on. Now, outline your research, outline your structure. Now you have a clear overview. Now, once you have that table will sort of provides. One second. Now you have a clear overview of the main connection and differences between the sources that you have read. Okay. I remember one of my PhD students was still blank. She doesn't know how to move on. She keep on sending me pages of write-up of the. She started with chapter 1. So I told her, where did this comes from? Well, from my reading. Now, where is your literature review? Okay. She has basically have a few pages of literature review. So finally, I asked her to come up with that table, and from that table, she started to read more, and build up the table, and finally, she was able to come up with a good literature review. But I've yet to go through with her. Now, you should have a clear overview of the main connection. So as you read your literature review, you have to see what are the connections between the various articles that you have read. Okay. And the differences between the sources that you have read. Now you need to decide how you group them together, and the order in which you'll discuss them. All right. So you got to decide what I'm going to do next. Okay? I've seen what are the differences between these articles, between these sources. What are the similarities? What are similar things that talk about? And now how do I go about organizing and writing them? Okay. Now for shorter papers, you outline. I mean, if it's a shorter paper, your outline can just identify the focus of each paragraph. For longer papers, you may have to divide it into sections with headings. There are a few different approaches that can take to help your structure, that help to structure your synthesis. If your sources cover a broad time period, right? For example, you read through an article, you found that the sources covers, say, like a 5-year studies, discussion of 5-year studies or 10-year study, and you found pattern on how researchers approach the topic over time, you can organize your discussion chronologically. For example, you have a set of a number of sources which range from the last 10 years, for example, right? Or the last 5 years, for example. Okay, you have 10 articles that you're reading from the year 2022, right, back down to 2017, for example. Okay, so maybe what you can do is you can you see how the pattern is, okay, how they approach over time, and you can organize your discussion chronologically, okay, in a way based on the years. Okay, some based on when you started with 2017, your discussion goes right down to 2022. But this does not mean that you just summarize, right? Instead, you should group articles in time period and identify what they have in common, as well as signaling important turning point and development in the literature, right? You still have to be critical. You have to synthesize in your discussion, although you discuss based on chronological. If the literature covers different topics, you can organize it thematically. This means that each paragraph or section focuses on a specific theme and explain how that theme is approached in the literature, right? If you read a number of articles that talk about different themes, different topics, you may want to come up with a theme for each papers and focus your discussion on that theme. We are drawing on literature from various different fields. For example, you have engineering, you've read on one paper that focuses on engineering, on medicine, but they still focuses in your area of study. So they use a wide range of research methods. You can organize them based on methodological. Someone mentioned about the gaps. Perhaps this is where perhaps you can address some of the gaps in the methodology that is being used. This means grouping together studies based on type of research they did and discussing the findings that emerge from each method, right? I think this is where if you are talking about a methodological gap, and you can link them, you can group them together as methodologically. If your topic involves a debate between schools of thought, you can organize them theoretically. This means that you compare the different. This is quite common, I think. This means that you compare the different theories that have been developed and grouping together papers based on position or perspective taken. If they take a similar position, you group them together, as well as evaluating the argument, which argument are most convincing to your research, right? So, so there are many ways for you to write in terms of flows of your idea. Illustrate the flow of ideas. Okay. Now, hold on a second. Okay, this is one example where it can be based on thematic, where you have a number of authors, right? Author A, you have 3 authors that discuss on theme A, 3 authors discuss on theme B, 3 authors discuss on theme C. So you write based on, organize your material based on idea, right? Not on authors, basically. So what are the ideas? Okay, these authors may speak on the same theme. This author makes on this, the other, this theme B is based on what the other authors are, the other 3 authors are talking about. So your discussion is based on theme, right? It can be 1 paragraph or 1 section, 1 theme, or 1 subsection of 1 theme. It's all up to you. Okay, yeah, flow of ideas is very important. That's why I say there must be a smooth flow of ideas, a smooth flow of discussion. It should not be disjointed. It should not be disjointed. And normally you don't give nightmares to the examiner. Do not give nightmares to the examiner as they read to examine your thesis, right? I mean, I had one issue with one thesis many years ago. It was not sent for proper proofreading. I was trying to read the literature. I couldn't understand what are the connection of the discussion, right? So I got fed up. I put aside the thesis. I did not read it for 1 week. Okay, I did not read it for 1 week, and I during the Viva session, I got to know even the other external examiner also got fed up reading, because the particular student did not send it for proofreading, but he was trying to save money, so he sent it to just someone who is not professional. Get a professional proofreader. It's very important. Okay, especially when it comes to your literature review, you want to ensure that there is a smooth flow in the discussion, and then there is very little grammatical error or drafting error, right? You don't give your examiner nightmares when they read. They're trying to figure out, what is this guy saying? What is he saying? Too many spelling mistakes and whatnot. Okay, if that happens, you're gonna. I can say that the examiner is going to give you a hard time during the Viva, and also perhaps it will affect your grade as well. So whatever it is, make sure that yes, proofreading is mandatory. I would suggest send it for proofreading. Do not submit a thesis that has not been sent for proofreading. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. Now let us move on a bit more. Now the issue of synthesizing. There was someone raised earlier discussion. There was some discussion on synthesizing the literature. How do you synthesize? When you say, remember the comment that is made in the Viva by one of the examiner, lack of synthesizing in the literature review. So when you write a literature review, you have to go beyond just summarizing it. Okay, not just summarize the article you read. You say, when you read, although it's not a copy-paste kind of work, but when you read a summarization of someone else's work, you feel that it's just like copy-paste work. Okay, you don't see the critical discussion, the synthesizing. It's not there. It's not there. It's just that you are reporting someone's finding. That's it. Okay. Now, for a PhD or DBA research or doctoral research, we expect you to be more than that. Now, at undergraduate level, yes. Okay, we can accept that. But when it comes to doctoral level, it has to be more than that. You have to discuss it critically. Okay, you have to synthesize your discussion, right? So you need to synthesize the literature to show how it all fits together and how your own research fits in. Okay, you discuss 2 or 3 researchers, 2 or 3 sources, and then you see how your research fits in with that 2 or 3 resources. So synthesizers mean combining. Instead of summarizing the main point of each source, in turn, you put together the ideas and finding of multiple sources in order to make an overall point. You want to make an overall point, all right? You do not want to have a separate point based on each source. You take all the sources together, you put them to you put the ideas together, all right? And then you want to make an overall point, okay? At the most basic level, this involves looking for similarities and differences between your sources. Look at your sources, okay? What are their similarities? And what are their differences, right? So your synthesis shows the reader where the sources overlap and where they diverge. I give you two examples here. This is a source from the Chicago School. The first part, or the first one, is the unsynthesized example. What did they do? They just summarize. Okay, France 2008 studied undergraduate online student. Okay, you just report what he do. He studied undergrad and online student. He looked at 17 females and 18 male and found that none of them like the APA system of writing thing. And according to France, the evidence suggested that all students are reluctant. So he reported what Perez says. And then he go to the next line, he reported what Goldstein says and what Goldstein did. This is an unsynthesized form of literature review. Now, how do you synthesize it? Now, what do you do here? Now, you report that studies of undergraduate students reveal conflicting conclusion. So you put the conclusion first, all right? Based on the table that you have put up, what is the conclusion? And you notice that, oh, this conclusion is quite conflicting between the authors. So you put that up first, okay? And then you start discussing about, remember it says here, or you make an overall point, okay? France says, found that no participant enjoy citation style, okay? Then you talk about Goldstein, but you put them two together. You put them together and you show that they tend to agree with each other, right? They tend to agree with each other. However, Perez took a different view. Okay, Perez took a different view. So he was looking at a larger and more diverse sample. It's happening. Okay, so basically, by synthesizing your write-up, okay, you can see that you tend to become more critical, and in a sense that it shows that this is the level of thinking that we want at doctoral level. Yeah. This we will accept. It is at MBA level or perhaps at undergraduate level, but not at this level. Is the thing that we look for. Say, I've read a lot of literature review during my course of supervising, also examining thesis, and I've come quite a number, but not many that have the ability to synthesize in the literature review. Most of them are just reporting or are just summarizing what others have said and reporting it back. Okay. Normally, when I examine that kind of write-up, I will comment and I would suggest them just to redo back the rewrite the literature review, which I think may not take the entire chapter, and it depends on if you go for major correction, then the external examiner will have to review it again. If it's a minor correction, then basically it is up to the level of either the supervisor or the internal examiner. So if you had to show it back to the external examiner, normally that is the major correction. I would prefer to my students to, and that's why, I mean, when you prepare your literature review, you must ensure that they are well written, right? Very critical in nature, and in a sense that it achieved the target of your write-up. During synthesizing, if I provide the similarities of contracting conclusion, should I also insert my current study? Yeah, it's very important. This is where you add your own, how does your research fits in, right? This is where you come in with your point. For example, quoting that my study anticipated will provide result as per research, and yeah, that is a good one in a sense, because you synthesize your own research into the discussion. That is a good type of discussion that we look for. Okay, but it must be supported. It must be supported. Okay, it must be. That's the purpose of literature review. You show that there's a research gap. Yeah. All right. So whatever it is, make sure that you support. It must be supported. It must be justified. Okay. I've seen a lot of statements made without any supportive literatures. That can be a little bit dangerous. Okay. Moving on. Okay, thank you, Lee. That's the purpose of the literature review. On other notes, with regard to professional doctorate and the role of literature review, in particular in relation to education doctorate or DBA thesis, a literature review for education doctorate and DBA degrees are to be more professionally oriented than for a PhD thesis, right? This is because the nature of the focus of the PhD research, where it tends to be theoretical in nature, is theoretically focused. It tends to be more academic, whereas for DBA and education doctorate, it's more professionally oriented in the sense that it is more focuses towards, as I said earlier, it is a practice doctorate, right? So the literature review tend to be shorter for education doctorate and the DBA, and because the dissertation is shorter. Basically, for DBA or education doctorate, it takes about 60,000 to 80,000 words. I've done some studies by universities in Malaysia. Most of it not less than 60,000 words, right? With a maximum of 80,000 words. In general, it can be more than that. I know some universities, they go up to even 100,000 words. But for PhD, it's normally between 80 and 100,000 words in the PhD thesis, right? So if you look at that, since the education doctorate and DBA tend to be shorter, so we don't expect the discussion on literature review to be lengthy as it is in the PhD thesis, right? But you have to achieve what you want to achieve. Okay, now, if authors A and B disagree on a point, yeah, okay, that shows that there is a gap. What is the standard length of literature review? And there is no standard length, I think, and the sources on how many years. Okay, I think Prof. Tames mentioned that in his discussion earlier. The literature review should not be more than 5 years. Okay, it must be to show that it's recent, right? Standard length of literature review, there is no standard length basically. As long as you achieve what you want to achieve, your discussion is there. I've seen recently I attended one viva where the literature review was too long. Okay, it is quite long because we don't see the relevancy of some of the discussion. Okay, it's just like he was paraphrasing a few articles, he put it there, but he never linked it to other discussion within the theoretical, within the literature review. Even his background of the study was about 8 pages, right? So as a reader, you get bored. And when you get bored, you give headache to, you give nightmare to the examiner, right? So writing lengthy may not be may not indicate that you have achieved what you want to achieve. I've seen one PhD, one DBA dissertation where the recommendation, the last chapter is written in in 2 pages, but it was very well written. It was very well written in 2 pages, right? And there was no issue with that particular thesis or dissertation. So it doesn't have to be as lengthy. It doesn't have to be lengthy. Okay. Okay. Now, moving on. I think I need to. I will stop earlier so that we can, if there is a discussion. Now, we have discussed this earlier. Okay, let's go back to this discussion on a comment made by the examiner. Now, the candidate literature review were quite extensive and recent. Now, the two key issues here is extensive. Extensive in the sense that your literature reviews covers all the important issues, right? And also the students cited works by well-known authors in that particular area of study. Yeah, for example, in entrepreneurship, we would love to see writings or literatures or works done by Timmons, works done by Lambing, works done by Kaplan's, works done by Lumpkin, right? Because normally the external examiner is someone who specializes in that area, right? Specializes in that area. So when they examine, they see whether you have done a very thorough and extensive literature search by looking at the key authors that you cited, right? And recent, as someone asked just now, if possible, 5 years and 5 years, not more than 5 years, right? Depending, as I said earlier, sometimes you want to cite some classical literature. If you are talking about historical, you want to discuss on the evolution of the theory. That's okay, but don't spend too much time. Don't spend too long in that discussion. Okay, just cite and show that this theory has been long in existence since whatever year. And okay, and please, as I said earlier, discussion should not go out of context. Right? I've seen a lot of students who come up in the discussion of the literature review. It doesn't even provide any, how shall I say, any relevancy to what is being discussed. You should have taken this one out before you submit it. Okay, don't put it there because you want to lengthen the discussion. No point. Okay, take it out. Put it somewhere you can use it for other research. Okay. Research framework. Now, I've noticed quite a number of candidates when they discuss their theoretical framework, they go straight to their research framework, and this is the research framework that will be used for this particular research, without any discussion on how they got to the research framework from the theoretical discussion. Okay, so there's no proper discussion. Suddenly you come up with that, and therefore this will be used in this study. Then you are in trouble. Okay, you are in trouble. You must discuss how that particular research framework is derived from your earlier discussion. Okay, why are you using this variable? Why are you not using the other variable discussed earlier? Okay, support it. Yes, support it with your literature review. Okay, now I want to go to two. There is this is a DBA Viva Voce comment made by the examiner. Look at the first one. The first candidate finished his DBA dissertation, his PhD. Sorry, he completed his DBA in 3 years. Actually, it's 2.5 years. But he cannot graduate because the requirement states that the requirement state in that particular university is 4 years for part-time, 3 years for full-time. So he cannot graduate in less than 3 years. But he did it in 2.5 years, and his research was good, was really good. I like the research, and even the other external examiner also loved it. It was well written, it was well researched, and the students presented it well in the Viva Voce. I had a tough time trying to figure out his weakness. Yeah, it was really good. So finally, they allow him to complete within 2.5 years on the Senate, on the approval of the Senate, on the condition that he publish an article in the Scopus Journal, which he did within that. After 2.5 years, he completed his Viva. He published one paper 3 months later, so he was able to finish his DBA in less than 3 years, right? So it has to be decided by the Senate of the university. I was at MQA last week. I had a good discussion with MQA. I asked them if a student registered for a 4-year DBA program, can they finish within 3 years? They say it's possible, they can finish, as long as they fulfill the requirement approved by the Senate, right? So it's up to the Senate to approve you. After all your PhDs results are all approved by the Senate before we can announce. So the first one was quite good. Okay, I've met him a few times. After that, I really like the way he's a very critical person, a very successful entrepreneur, and quite interesting guy as well. And the number 4 candidate, basically, this is quite serious. Look at point number 1. The candidate made a serious, reckless mistake when she cited a book by Schumpeter. Even this is she quoted Schumpeter's published in 1982, whereas Schumpeter died in 1950. Right, this is a very serious mistake which should not have happened, and this is why, as I said earlier, you need to send it for proofreading, okay, so that you do not have this kind of mistakes in your thesis. To me, this is reckless, right? To me, this is reckless. It should not have happened, right? And other comment made by the examiner. Overall, the candidate discussed in great length on pertinent issues related to her study. However, her discussion actually lacks synthesis. As I said, lacks synthesis. In other way, she discussed one literature and then she goes to the next literature. She goes to the next literature. There's no synthesis between overall discussion, and she did not even link what was discussed earlier to what was discussed later, and she did not even give a critical review of her literature. Right? She was just summarizing and reporting it in the literature review. She did not do an exhaustive literature search in defining entrepreneurship. That's it. Important researchers and scholars are missing from her discussion, such as Timmons, Lambing, Beringer, Kaplan, and others. It's not there. Okay, it's not there. She did not cite these renowned scholars in that particular research. She had to do a major correction. Okay, she had to do a major correction. Okay, now let's see whether what else do I have. Okay, okay. Now let us do some Q&A. If you have any questions, let us discuss over here. What is the differences between research framework and methodology? Oh, okay, very interesting. Methodology is what method are you going to use in conducting your research, and research framework is the framework that you derive from your literature review, which will be used in your particular research. And normally in your research framework, you discuss about your variables. Okay, as Jasmine said, you may have a moderating variable that you want to introduce, so you introduce a moderating variable in your framework. Okay, it must be supported by your earlier discussion in your theoretical framework. Standard. Okay, Prof, if I were to discuss about underpinning theory, which normally quite some time ago, can we do double quote? What do you mean by double quote? Or we need to go back to the original article, which was discovered much earlier. My meaning of double quote is mentioning author ABC quoted and theory developed by author ABC quoted XXX theory developed by DEC. So, as I said earlier, you can quote, but don't put too many quotes. Okay, double quote is okay as long as you don't have too many quotes in there, right? Author restricted to okay, restricted to author another paper. Could we have your email, please? All right, now which email should I give? You want my UMK email, or you want my UTM email, which is still active, or you want my UNITAR email, or you want my UITM email? I have my, I don't want to give you my UNITAR email because I do not know if I move out of UNITAR later on, you may not be able to contact you. So I'll give you my, but then again, okay, I give you 2 emails. You can contact me through my UNITAR email. Or you can contact me through my personal email. At gmail.com. All right. Wow, I sent it to Dr. Shah. Sorry. Who asked for my email? Hold on a second. Oh, okay. Let me send it to everyone. I sent to everyone. How do I send to everyone? Oh, okay, got it. Okay. Okay. Did you get my email? Actually, I would prefer to discuss Yasmin's question in my supervision with her. But since he has raised it, should be very interesting. Now, why do you need moderating variable? Why do you need now? It all must be supported by your literature review. You cannot just put them there. All right. If you want to introduce, now some people would like to introduce moderating variable or intermediate variable, for example, because based on their literature review, they found out that the previous researchers were not, they were just studying on the direct relationship between the dependent and independent variable. So basically, you feel that there's a gap there, and you feel that the mediating variable need to be introduced to show that there are other effects on the relationship. Okay, it can be either moderating or intermediate or whatever, and that is why you want to include it into your research. Okay, based on your finding of your literature review, you found out that so far there's a gap there. There's a gap there that you feel that your research can contribute towards filling up that gap, and that's why you introduce those mediating variables or moderating variables or whatever variables you are introducing, right? Okay, but it must be supported with your literature review. Hold on a second, let me check. For systematic literature review, it's advisable to use, yes, Prisma. Yeah, I was about to get to that. Yes, Prisma or preferred reporting item for systematic review. Yes, I would encourage you to use Prisma because Prisma is quite, it helps you a lot in systematic literature review. It's possible. I'm sure some universities provide such. They do have such software. Use it, and also I know some like UNITAR, for example. Our library conducted courses from time to time on Mendeley. Use it, okay? Use whatever tool there is, all right? Use whatever tool there is. Now, during my time, we don't have such facilities, all right? So the only thing that we rely a lot on was in writing our thesis was the Microsoft Words. I remember I told you about that 1 hour training session that we had during lunchtime. That was it most of the time. How to use Microsoft Excel, how to use Microsoft Word effectively in preparing your write-up, okay? In organizing your references and whatnot. But now you have a lot of tools that to assist you, and I don't see any reason why you cannot come up with a good set of theses. Okay, yeah, okay, Sharif, yes, I agree. Yeah, users checklist, yes, right. Okay, thank you so much, Lee. Okay, if there is any other question coming from you guys, or you can just ask any questions straight away. You don't have to type it here. Are they allowed to speak directly? Is their microphone on? Is standard length, authors, P, okay. Okay, did I miss anything here? Yeah, I think I've covered almost everything. And notes. Okay, I think that's about it. Okay, organizer, can I pass it back to you? If there is no further question.
I think there are question dekat dalam chat Prof Hassan. Ada a few.
Okay, can you read out for me?
Yeah, I saw a few. One by Kuratul Ain. Is this true that we need to write chapter 2 first before writing chapter 1? That's one.
That's a very good question. All right. Now you may have the problem, research problem, right? Now how are you going to how are you going to prepare chapter 1? Now I would normally ask my student to start with chapter 2 concurrently with chapter 1, right? Because they are very related. You have the problem, right? And how do you support that that research problem exists and it is worth researchable? It should be supported by chapter 2. So in your literature review, oh, thank you, Dato' Anapi. Have you got back from Makkah already? Okay, as you, in my case, for example, I started with chapter 2. My supervisor asked me to write chapter 2, and then as I write chapter 2, I prepare my chapter 1. It's supposed to be hand in hand. All right, because I know some supervisors prefer to start with chapter 1 and slowly develop chapter 2. So it depending on your supervisor as well. But I would prefer my student to start with chapter 2 and then slowly develop chapter 1 based on chapter 2, right? Because you want your discussion in chapter 1 to be supported by chapter 2. So chapter 2 should start first and then slowly you go back to chapter 1. Now some supervisors will prefer chapter 1 and then prepare chapter 2 to support what you have in chapter 1. They start with problem statement, and from the problem statement they slowly develop chapter 1 and then chapter 2. So it depends. Yeah, it depends on discuss with your supervisor. In my case, I will prefer to have chapter 2 first, right? Because from the literature you start to develop you start to expand your problem statement, and then from there you come up with your basically your research questions, even your background of the study should come from your literature review. All right. So either way it works. As long as it is being supported by literatures. Okay. So that's why it's important that your literature review is properly prepared. Yeah, to support your problem statement. Okay. Can okay. Oh, for DBA student, do we need to perform the same amount of literature review? Like, oh, okay. As I said earlier, the literature review is whether you're doing a DBA or PhD, you need to do your literature review, right? The purpose is still the same, except that it depends on the type of research. The DBA dissertation, depending on if you're doing qualitative research, for example, DBA tend to be more qualitative than quantitative, based on my experience. Yeah, based on my experience in examining thesis and whatnot. So the depth of the research is very important. So when you talk about depth of research, normally the literature review is not as far-reaching as wide as the PhD research. Okay, because you focus more on the practical aspect, on the practice of it, rather than on the theoretical aspect of it. But you do need theory. You need to support. You must be supported by theories. So basically, the way you prepare your literature review is almost the same, right? Except that the extensiveness may be different, right? Extensiveness may be different. You still need to have literatures to support, yeah, to support your contention, to support your models. You still may have to come up with your research framework that must be supported by your research and your theoretical by your theoretical framework. You cannot move away from that. Okay, I think this is the problem that is being faced. I know one university, the percentage of students not completing their DBA dissertation is quite high because they come from the industry. So their problem is when it comes to developing the theoretical framework and the research framework. That's where the problem is. They are not exposed too much into that. Okay, unlike the PhD students, mostly comes from the academic setting. Mostly academician, they're used to doing research and whatnot. So basically, and I think the DBA students need to start early, not wait until you have completed your comprehensive exam. You can start doing. In fact, UNITAR, we already started to expose our PhD DBA student much earlier during the first year, rather than wait after they start their dissertation in the third year if they are part-time student, because we want them to start early, right? We don't in UNITAR, for example, we do not require them to sit for comprehensive exam. So basically, they can start their research early. They can be appointed a supervisor much earlier than a university that requires comprehensive exam for the DBA program. Okay. Will there be a list of seminars available for recording? Tip determining research philosophy paradigm that relate to. Okay, tips to determine the research philosophy paradigm that related to your research method. This is very interesting in that sense. That's why I say that matrix, the table that I showed earlier, is very important because that will help you to come up with the research philosophy paradigm based on the method that you have to use. For example, if you're using in my PhD research, for example, I use both, right? Now, I'm a quantitative person. When I go there, I was using quantitative method for my data collection, and I was targeting high-tech assemblies in Malaysia. And most of the companies are basically coming in from the multimedia super corridor, which just got started. So I was unlucky in that sense. There were not many companies then, and I only got back about 80 responses out of 300 that I sent out. So my supervisor said, no, Hassan, your data is not rich enough. You have to follow through with an in-depth study. So that was what I did. It was tough for me because being a quantitative person, trying to start a qualitative research was tough. Okay, I'm not the kind of person who's good verbally, but my supervisor was really helpful because he's a qualitative person. I'm a quantitative person. He helps me significantly throughout my research, and I was lucky because Alan Bremer, the author of a research methodology book, which is quite popular, happens to be a professor at Lapro University at that time. He was teaching there. We learned a lot from him firsthand, right? So basically, I use both method, mixed mode. And after I completed my research, I found out that I love qualitative research more than quantitative, although I'm a quantitative person, because I learned a lot more through qualitative research rather than quantitative research. Because through quantitative, it tends to be very superficial. But through qualitative, you can probe deeper, and you can answer questions of how and why, which you cannot get it through quantitative method. Let's say this is the research philosophy paradigm, which I think should be interesting if you're going into both methods, right? If you can, it's up to you exactly. Example of synthesized writing is really okay. Thank you. Right, chapter 2 and update chapter 1. Okay, good. Right. We see the recording Monday. Thank you, thank you very much, Prof. Give me confidence. Okay, good. Good to hear that. Yana. All right, insight from here. Okay, you're most welcome. Okay, for quantitative research apart from SPSS, what else would you recommend, Prof? Oh, okay. I'm not sure what other software are available at the moment because I'm so much so into SPSS. Even when I'm doing my PhD, Even most of my PhD students are using SPSS. If any of you here knows any other software that can be used for quantitative research, please share it right here so that others can benefit as well. Hi everyone, my name is Zara. I'm a final year student. 2 minutes for the time to fill. Oh, okay. You're taking the opportunity. All right. So please help her out, everyone, by responding to her survey. Wow, you're really taking advantage here. Okay. Right. Can you explain the theoretical framework and assumptions of qualitative? Oh, very interesting. Can you explain the theoretical framework and assumptions of qualitative? Okay. Now, when I did my qualitative research, now in my quantitative research, I have hypothesis tests. But when I was doing my qualitative research, I had my proposition test. I came up with, okay, when I did my quantitative research, I found out that there are a few phenomena that cannot be explained through the quantitative research. For example, the why and how part. I'll give you an example. In my quantitative research, I found out that high-tech SMEs face financial barriers, right? Financial barriers. But then, based on my my investigation, I found out there's a lot of funding available. But why is it funding still become a barrier? So I want to find out why. That is when I go in and probe further through qualitative research. I later found out that the funding is available, and most SMEs face barriers in getting funding because high-tech SMEs, because most of the officers that process the loan do not understand the technology. So that is the barrier that was not picked up by my quantitative research, which I got from my qualitative research, right? So there are assumptions, right, in qualitative research that you have to make, in a sense that, but in my case, for example, I started with quantitative. There are others who started with qualitative as an exploratory, then they go into quantitative. So it depends on then again on your objective and also on your problem statement. Okay. All right. There is one prof before shared a software which enlarges the most frequently used words in a collection of essays. But I think that must be in the qualitative. You have Envivo. You have during my time I was using Nodis because I didn't like the name, so I stopped using it. We have Envivo. You can, I think it was Envivo if I'm not wrong. Okay. Okay, Prof, do you know the software? I think it's Envivo. If anybody remembers what was, I think Prof Amir mentioned it in his last talk. I think. Yeah, I think it's Envivo. N, letter N, big letter N, V-I-V-O. Yeah, got it. Thank you, Nuroda. Okay. Okay. Okay, I think that's about it. I will, if there is no further question, I would like to hand over back this to the organizer, and thank you very much for every one of you for being so patient. Okay, normally at this time of the day, you should be out shopping with your family, and yet you spend time, your precious time here with me. I really appreciate that. I already shared my my email address. If you have any further, with coronavirus going on, if any further discussion, if you need to ask further, you just contact me through my email address. And there's another question coming. Salam Pro, I believe that experimental research are mostly related to qualitative. Some new research like citation due to how can we find that? Oh, okay. Hold on a second. I believe that the, hold on, I'm trying to bring it down again. Research are mostly related to qualitative research, experimental research. Okay. Some new research like citation due to novelty. Okay, wow. This is something very difficult to respond because I have not done recently I have not done any qualitative research. Some research use citation, lack of citation due to, yes, I have to agree with that. One way is to contact the author, right? Contact the author or contact the researcher. There are many ways to do that. Either you search through the website or you go to LinkedIn and get their contact through LinkedIn, send an email directly to them or contact them to LinkedIn. and ask their permission to use their source, right? Or get them to send you a copy. And normally they would be obliging to share it with you, unless if it's a confidential source of reference, which I don't think so. Then you can get that from them. Okay, right? Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for the comment. So whatever it is, you feel free to contact me. Normally I would share my phone number, but I don't think I want to share it today because there's too many of you here. I don't want someone coming and start selling me insurance policy. Or it happened to me once. I shared my phone number and then I received a lot of contact offering me some mutual fund and whatnot. So I would rather share my email address. Please feel free to contact me. Okay. If you need to come and see me, my office is probably if one want to use information website, do we need a request? No need. No, you don't have to, because basically it is publicly available. All right. Okay, good. Tariq Al-Sabah, good to hear. Yes, maybe we can have a conversation in WhatsApp. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So whatever it is, contact me through my email. My office is at level 9 at UNITAR International University in Kelana Jaya. Feel free to come, and hope you guys be successful in your research. And who knows, maybe either me, Prof. Rosino, Prof. Amir may end up becoming your external examiner, right? So whatever it is, you'll be given tips from me and Prof. Amir, and hopefully we hope to see you carrying the title DR, Doctor, once you completed your research. Okay, with that, I hand over back this session to the organizer. Thank you very much. Okay, Assalamualaikum.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Assalamualaikum. I was following your lecture from Bangladesh. It was really thought-provoking. Thank you very much, Prof.
Oh, thank you. Salam warahmatullah. I just got one application for DBA from one student from Bangladesh.
Okay, nice to know that. Thanks, Prof.
Okay.
Thank you, Prof.